Have you ever wished that you could make use of the rumble feature of your game controller? You could use it to let your robot give you feedback, or you could use it to alert the driver that it's 10 seconds before endgame. Well, your wish has been granted. Hey everyone, my name is Mr. Phil, and I am coach of the GeForce FTC team, and I'm a member of the FTC Tech team. I'm going to show you some of the features that are in the new 2021-2022 software development kit and the standard apps that you run on your phone or your control hub or your driver station this year. I'll also show you some new samples that exist in the software development kit, and you can use these to create your own rumble features. So stand by and check it out. Before we get into this too much, I want to send a special shout out to a recent member of the FTC Tech team, Michael. He's an alumni from Frogbots. Michael's done all of the code for the new Gamepad features, and it's really cool to have fresh ideas and fresh programming in the tech team. All right, so basically I have a setup here. I have a control hub and a battery, and I'm running the standard 7.0 SDK APK on this controller. This could be a phone, it doesn't have to be a control hub. Whatever technology is legal, you just need to run the 7.0 version, which is fresh for this season. I also have a driver hub, which is like a phone, but it's custom packaged by Rev Robotics, and it has the convenience of having USB connected straight on here, so that you don't need an external hub and stuff like that, and it doesn't use the the small micro connectors, so it's more robust. And that's available this year. All right, so all of the features I'm going to talk about here are considered advanced Gamepad features, mainly to distinguish them from what we've had in the past. And if you ever have a controller that doesn't work quite right with these new features, you can always turn off the Advanced Gamepad mode. It comes on default, and it's on the settings menu. I'm just going to go in here. If I scroll up here, Advanced Gamepad features. So some of the things on this screen is you can turn on or off the advanced features. You can turn on or off Rumble on Bind, and Rumble on Bind is a new feature that whenever you bind to user 1 or user 2, that controller actually does a little single rumble or a double rumble for user 1 or user 2, so that's pretty cool. Also, another thing that's available over here is the ability to define a default gamepad. So if you always want your PlayStation gamepad to be the driver and another PlayStation or a different gamepad to be the co-pilot, then you can assign them here so that whenever you start the app, it automatically assigns them so that you don't have to remember to do the manual assignment. So that's a pretty cool feature. So I'm just going to back out of here. So the special gamepad features that you can use depend a lot on the particular controller you're using. The Logitech 310 has, I don't think it even has rumble features in it, and you can use the Rev Robotics ETPark or a Xbox controller or the latest PlayStation 4 controller, and they each have more and more elaborate rumble features and lights and all sorts of stuff. So it kind of depends on what you want to do. The one that seems to work the best for me is the PlayStation PS4 controller, this one here. It's very capable. It's got fairly cool rumble features and lights, and the buttons and the joysticks have a really good feel to them. All right, so I have an ETPark controller here. It has rumble motors, it has a touchpad, and it has an LED, multicolor LED here. All right, so when I plug this in, and move this cord over here so it doesn't fall over. Watch this light here and the screen over here. So I plug it in automatically, and so it detected the gamepad, it looked it up, it saw, oh, that's a predefined gamepad. I'm going to assign it to user 1 automatically, and I'm going to rumble it once, and it also lit it up blue. So there's multiple indications that it's recognized that gamepad and that it's working. And if you wanted to, you can actually do a user 2, change it, and a user 1, and each time you change it, it'll change the color of the LED and it'll do the rumble. So that was an automatic assignment. And I have another gamepad here, which has not been seen by the system before. So I'm going to plug this one in. And it's not going to do anything. It's going to light up green, indicating it doesn't really, it's not pre-assigned. And if I do a start B on this, so it did 2 little rumbles and it's lit up red. So that's now assigned as Gamepad 2. Now if I want to make that a permanent assignment, so that every time I power it up, it defaults to this gamepad being Gamepad 2, I can go to the advanced settings screen. And I want it to be user 2, so I click here, and it says press a key, so I press a key on the gamepad, and now it's permanently assigned it. So that's kind of cool. And it will remember that. Now you can change it, you know, while you're driving, or if you pick up the wrong controller or something, and it will stick with that until you stop the app and start it again, and then it'll come back to the default. So all of those are standard features that out of the box that you can use to improve your driving experience. Everything else requires then that you add some extra calls into your OpModes to manipulate the rumble and some other features on the gamepad. So all of the new features for the gamepad controllers are illustrated in 2 of the samples, the standard samples, and I'm going to work through those in a second. And they are, one sample is called Concept Gamepad Rumble, and the other one's called Concept Gamepad Touchpad, because several gamepads, mainly the PS4, has got this little square region here that you can touch and move around, and it acts like a 2-dimensional joystick. It acts like a joystick. And in fact, this controller lets you have 2 independent touches, so they're just available as XY values, just like a joystick, and they're also available through the improved gamepad interface. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run a slightly modified version of the standard robot controller app where 2 of those samples have been turned on. So if I now select a program, we'll see these 2 samples. So these have not been modified in any way other than to turn off the disable feature so they show up in the menu. And I'm going to do the first one, which is the Gamepad Rumble, and I'm going to knit it, and I'm going to play it. So just because I like my red gamepad better, I'm going to assign that one as Gamepad 1, because that's what the app uses. So you'll notice that when I did that, it vibrated and it also said, are we rumbling? Yes. So this is the test program basically illustrating stuff. So there's various things I can do to make this controller rumble based on the code that's been put in here. One of those is to squeeze the right-hand trigger, and at a certain point it will do a single rumble, and you'll see it changes to yes. Now, something else that this app illustrates, this OpMode illustrates, is that you might want to indicate to the operator that a certain time is coming up, and they should be doing whatever they're meant to do. So you might see you'll see a countdown here. This OpMode is counting down, and when it gets to 0, it's going to do a little custom rumble sequence, and that's something else that's illustrated in the sample, is how you can build your own rumble of blips and blurps and lefts and rights to indicate different things. So it just did like a 3 rumble sequence there. So that's something else. And then we have another thing we can do in this OpMode, this sample, and that is to it says if I hold down the left bumper, now my 2 triggers will actually activate the left and right rumbles separately. So the PlayStation 4 has got a large, slow rumble on the left side and a fast, small rumble on the right side. So I can squeeze the trigger and I get a feel for it. So if you run this test app, this sample app, you can play with your controller and see what all sorts of features it has in terms of rumble controls. I'm going to stop here and I'm just going to start the other app. So I'm going to start the Gamepad Touchpad. And you'll see it currently says no fingers, and that's because I have no fingers on here. But if I put a finger on the touchpad, it's giving me its coordinates. 0, 0 is in the center of the touchpad. X goes from -1 on the left to +1 on the right. And then Y goes from +1 at the top to -1 on the bottom. And if I then I can actually get 2 touches, so I can do all sorts of cool stuff. So this may be a feature that you use if you need some more proportional control, or you want, who knows what you could use this for, but it's another great input you can get from your gamepad controller. So now that you've seen those run, I'm just going to do a walkthrough on the code. As a driver, if you're looking at this, you will tell your programmer, hey, I want to be able to do this, that, and the other, and they can look at the walkthrough. And as a programmer, of course, you want to see how this is done and see the calls. It's the calls have been set up. Michael's done a great job. We have some basic calls just for doing a single blip or turning the rumbles on or off. Or if you want something more sophisticated, you can create your own custom rumble with time delays and left motor and right motor, and build a little sequence, and then whenever you want to play it, you just say, hey, play this custom rumble. You can also tell if it's rumbling, so you can hold off doing additional things if you've got multiple rumbles happening and stuff like that. So it's really a lot of cool stuff you can do with this just by making 1 or 2 calls into the code. So let's get into it. So to work with the code, the first thing you're going to want to do is download the latest 7.x SDK and open it up with Android Studio. If you're using onbot Java, you can use these same samples. You can just do it, add new onbot Java code and select from these samples. So I'm in the robot controller module, the external samples, and a lot of these have already been here, and there's a few new ones. So the 2 new ones are that we're talking about today are the Gamepad Rumble and the Gamepad Touchpad. So opening up the Gamepad Rumble. If you want to try this code out, don't forget you need to go down and comment out the disable line so that when you rebuild this code, you can select this from the menu. So the thing to notice here is that there's a fairly large comment section in the front that explains several things. In this section here, it explains the different gamepads. It talks about the available methods and then describes the 4 examples that are in this op mode. The thing to keep in mind here is that the new rumble features are available through the existing Gamepad 1 and Gamepad 2 objects. So just like you would get buttons and joysticks, you can now access the rumble. And the methods that we can use range from fairly simplistic to fairly cool. The lowest level call is really this rumble method, and you pass it the power level for the the rumble 1 and the rumble 2. On the PS4 gamepad, the rumble 1 is on the left, and it's a fairly beefy rumble, and rumble 2 is on the right, and it's a fairly lightweight one. And then you tell it how many milliseconds you want to run for. If you just want to turn on the rumble and leave it on until some later point, you can do that, and the trick is to, instead of using an actual duration in milliseconds, you use this constant rumble duration continuous, and that's shown in the examples later on. If all you want to do is just send us some little rumble blips to the operator, you can use the rumble blips call, and you just tell it how many blips you want to pass, and it basically blips all of the rumble motors at full power for little short pulses. We've sort of chosen duration and gaps between them that seem reasonable. If you don't like them, you can create your own sequence using the next method, which is the rumble effect. And this call is actually showing how to invoke a custom rumble effect, and you just give it the effect you've created, and we'll show further down how to create this custom rumble effect. And it's basically a combination of steps of rumbles and pauses that make the effect that you want. You can also call is rumbling, which will tell you is there an active rumble happening right now, and you might want that to prevent you from starting a new one if there's already a rumble happening. There's a stop rumble, which will stop any in progress rumble or rumble effect. And then there's it's a really short rumble call that you can just tell it how many milliseconds. It'll just rumble all the motors for the period that you give it. So that's kind of convenient if you just want to start a rumble. All of these calls return immediately, and the rumble effect is executed in the background. The commands are actually sent to the driver station, and the driver station runs them, so the robot controller really doesn't get held up by the rumble action. So quickly, the examples that are in this sample. The first one shows how to create a rumble effect and then as an example of how you might use it, we tie it to the time elapsed in the current game. In this case, at halftime in the game, it's going to play this rumble effect. But you could use this for any timed activity you want, like beginning, end game, before end game, seconds before the end of the match, stuff like that. Figure 2 shows how you can just vary the rumble power based on a sensor input. It could be a range sensor or a distance sensor or some kind of angle sensor, who knows what. But we are just simulating this by making the rumble motors run according to how tightly you're squeezing the triggers. Example 3 shows how to use the rumble blip, so just triggering any kind of multi-blip sequence, and in this case we're triggering it based on a gamepad button A press, but we are showing here that you have to detect the actual edge of when you press that button, not just that you're currently pressing it. So you only just trigger the rumble sequence once. You don't want to continually trigger it, otherwise it'll just sort of blurp at you. And the final example shows how you might want to trigger a rumble as an input value changes. We use one of the triggers so that when it gets to a certain value it triggers the rumble effect, and then you just get one effect. You might do this to tell you that you're getting within range of a wall or that your arm is in a certain position. So this is just one more example. So let's walk through the code here. We have a couple of variables that we set up ahead of time that we use during the op mode, and in a lot of cases they're keeping track of what happened last time around the loop. What was the last value of A? What was the last value of the left bumper? Are we currently above a certain threshold, and are we in the second part of the game? And we just use these to inhibit further rumble effects. Looking down in the code, here's our setup for the op mode, and this shows how we can set up a custom rumble effect. The name of the effect in this case is custom rumble effect, and it's created by using the builder method. And basically you create a new builder and then you add all these steps, just as successive lines. So this sequence is building up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. The first step is setting the power of the second rumble motor to 100%, that's 1, for 500 milliseconds. So in this case that's the right hand rumble, which is the small one, and so it'll just spin for half a second. And then we add in a pause, because we set rumble 1 and 2 to 0, and we say pause for 300 milliseconds. Then we rumble motor 1 for a quarter of a second, then have a quarter of a second delay, and then do it again. So when this plays, you'll get a long fast rumble on the right, and then 2 slightly shorter rumbles on the left. So once we've created that effect, you can call it at any point in the program later on. You can call it multiple times, and you can create multiple effects if you like. You can have custom rumble effect 1, custom rumble effect 2, or whatever you want to do there. So once that's set up, we go into our main loop, which is active as long as we are playing the op mode. And here the first thing we do is just read a couple of the gamepad buttons. So we read the button A and the left bumper, so we can use these later on in the program. There's quite a few telemetry statements in here that are designed to let you, the user, experiment with this op mode. But the main activity in this example is the code is checking the current runtime, which is how long we've been in this op mode, and seeing if we're past halfway. And if we're past halfway, and this is our first time that we're past halfway, it calls run rumble effect and passes it that custom rumble we created, so it'll do that cool 3 rumble sequence. And then it sets a flag to say, hey, I'm in the second half of the program now, and we use that so that we don't trigger the rumble effect again. And just so we can see what's happening here, there's a little telemetry statement that does a countdown from when this is going to run. So that's a simple example, creating a rumble effect and then triggering it based on time. In the second example, we are going to drive the left and the right rumbles proportionally based on the position of the triggers, the left and right trigger. So once again, we only want to do this while we don't want to do this all the time, so we've set up a button, the left bumper, to enable this. So if the left bumper is being pressed, then all we do is we call gamepad rumble, and we pass it the left trigger value and the right trigger value, and we give it a
rumble duration continuous so that it just keeps running at this power, and we display this while it's happening. If we're not pressing the left button, the left bumper, we do a quick check, and if we were pressing it last time around the loop and we're not pressing it now, that means we've basically let it go. So we do a single call to stop rumble, and so that way once you let go of the left bumper, it'll stop the rumble, and then it just won't do anything else, so it'll just be idle at that point, so it won't mess up any other rumbles that are happening. Example 3, this is just basically triggering when the A button is pressed, but it makes sure that it only does it when it's initially pressed. So if the A button is being pressed and it wasn't being pressed last time, so not last A, then it would call rumble blips pass it 3. We put one other condition on here, and that is we do that as long as it's not already rumbling. So what we're saying here is if you've just pressed the button and there isn't a rumble actually currently happening, then do the 3 blips, which is a cool way to prevent it from just like if you clicked it twice in a row, you wouldn't get 3 or 4 or 5 blips, you'd just get the standard 3 blips. You don't really need to do this check if you know, it's not a problem, but this was just showing how you use that is rumbling flag. The 4th example is triggering a single rumble based on the level of some kind of sensor or some kind of variable. In this case, we're just doing it based on the right trigger. So now, in this case, if the right trigger is greater than some threshold, I think it's 75% here, there we go, and we're not already over the threshold, then we call a rumble, and then we set a flag to say, hey, we're over the threshold, so don't do it anymore. And then once we let it go, once the signal goes below the threshold, then it will say high levels false, so then it will trigger again. So this is another example of some simple code that just gives you one rumble when the event happens and then stops playing. Alright, so that's pretty much all the rumble effects. I suggest you check this out. It's kind of fun to play with it and try it with your gamepad to make sure it works well. So now we're going to stop this guy and we're going to take a look at the touchpad. Once again, there's a fairly good comment section at the top. It talks about how you can potentially detect 1 or 2 fingers and what the coordinate system is and what sort of values you should expect. So definitely want to read this. Definitely want to comment out the disabled line if you intend to run this. And this code is extremely simple. Once again, we're using the gamepad object just like we would to get any other controls, and we're testing, in this case, touchpad finger 1 member, which tells us is there a first finger being detected. And if there is, we set the flag to be true, and then we display the finger position, the X and Y position, which we get by reading touchpad finger 1X and touchpad finger 1Y. Likewise, we can check for a second finger press, because some gamepads will actually detect 2. It does the same thing. If it's being pressed, it says, hey, we've got a finger, and then it displays that second finger. And then finally, there's just a line in here that says, if there's no finger being pressed, detected, just say no fingers. So from the example, you can see that running. But that's pretty much both examples. So I suggest you give those a try, uncomment them, build the code, or just add them using onbot Java and play with the rumble controller. Have some fun, let the robot tell you what's going on. Alright, thanks very much.